Good evening, Craig. We wanted to talk people through the Gajumaru wallet clutch and one of the key aspects of what's built into the Gajumaru wallet, which is grids. So the whole point of the wallet is that we built something that was not pre-hacked by the NSA, hi guys, or the GCHQ, hi guys, or the PLA, yes, hi to you too. Um, but the idea being that we actually create a secure environment that people can interact with their assets with, and none of the dependencies that essentially open it up to all of these loopholes. You were the person that put your foot on this landmine and discovered just how screwed up the whole thing was. So can you start by telling us, explain the problem, explain how these things are not working and where this creates the security vulnerabilities that we're trying to solve with between the wallet and specifically grids.
Okay. So most wallets that we have seen for convenience are built into browsers. When I say built into browsers, they're browser plugins. The execution context in the browser world is already pretty sketchy, and it's hard to understand exactly what's going on when. One, because it's a highly concurrent environment. So just even if you wrote all your own code as a plugin, you don't necessarily know what's talking to what or what's visible to what, and you're completely at the mercy of the browser protecting you from both yourself and everybody else, which could be moving. So malicious code running in another tab could be reading stuff in an extension somewhere. There's a bunch of vectors of attack, and they're not all discovered, and they're not all pinned down, and there are deliberate backdoors in some of these things too. But, who knew? So that's one layer. That's in the best case. That's the best case, is that it's just a crazy environment to try to do anything securely in. The second layer of this comes in with a thing we call NPM. NPM is a package manager for JavaScript. If you're going to write things that plug into a browser, it has to be in WebAssembly or JavaScript or whatever. It has to execute in that browser context. There's only a handful of ways to write things for that. NPM is sort of the catch-all package manager that is emerged from the slime at the bottom of the bathhouse in the web world. And what it does is it lets you quickly pull dependencies in, like, oh, I know a library that does X, Y, and Z. I need those things. I'll pull it in and just build it, and it runs. Okay, cool. That's a good thing, ostensibly. What's not so good is that it does automatic dependency resolution quite often. And what that means is I want to use framework X that does a few things for me, but framework X depends on package Y, and package Y just got updated. And every time I build my code, I don't know if package X is being updated or not, actually. There's ways to lock that down, but it gets a little bit fraught. And further, if I'm going to try to audit a framework, that's a huge task, so nobody does it in practice. People claim to, but they don't really do it. And if they audit that framework, they definitely don't audit the 10,000 dependencies downstream of it. So a common experience in web development is you would say, oh, I want to write a wallet. Okay, I have an idea how to do that. I see there's an SDK for this, whatever the project is. Cool. I know Vue, not just JS. I know Vue specifically. So I'm going to use Vue. And so you build the Vue Hello World. Hello World in Vue comes out to something like 47,000 lines, I think it was. Nobody's reviewing that much code. And that's for Hello World. Now, if I'm going to start using a bunch of interesting extended features to build some reactive interface that's going to be in a wallet, that line count's going way up. And I'm bringing new stuff in from other libraries that I've never reviewed myself that are all running in the same context. What's calling what? How many of these have identified that, hey, this is I'm running in the context of a project called Wallet X, and Wallet X is on this other blockchain, and I want to steal from that. So I'm going to put some malicious code in a subdependency somewhere that no one's going to notice because no one reviews this stuff. Identify my execution context. Now do the malicious thing where I steal a key or whatever. A huge percentage. It's something like half of web-based compromises in the last 2 years have been from npm malicious packages. So just to give you an idea, that's the attack surface. It's huge.
Mhm.
No, and it's totally opaque. Um, now, I was curious, realizing that this is kind of sketchy. I thought, man, what's that huge project everybody uses? It's for Ethereum. It's MetaMask. I wonder what MetaMask has done to solve this. So our dear friend Peter Harpending and I look into this, and Peter Harpending, man, his reactions were epic over this. We kept finding things that we thought were jokes, and then realized they weren't jokes, and the layer cake just kept, like, it was like peeling an onion, and just kept getting worse. We found a thing called Lava Moat. Lava Moat is a JavaScript execution environment written in JavaScript, executing in a JavaScript environment to try to whitelist packages. So, basic rule in computer science: everything's too complicated for you to fully comprehend. That's even true of arithmetic if you dig into it. People don't even know what a number is, literally. Mathematicians don't. Ask a mathematician, they'll like, they get upset. But it's true. Like, what is a number is not a trivial question by itself. So just starting there.
Bit like, what is money?
Yeah, what
No,
exactly?
we're not
So
getting into that one.
yeah, I won't go into monetary theory, I promise. But my point is that there's some elementary things that are complicated already to try to come to terms with. We simplify that by having a machine definition of, okay, I know what a number is, and I have a behavioral pattern around numbers that we've defined. We got rules. Okay, cool. When we start stacking rules up on a program system, you get to a point where the complexity is unmanageable. And the way, in a secure context, you need to understand what's going on. That's a very important need. And the way to get back to sanity is to reduce complexity back to where a mortal can understand what's going on. The MetaMask people are like, they saw complexity that's unmanageable, and they go, the solution to this is make it vastly more complex. That's definitely the ticket. So
Well, that's
there's
the
a,
Polygon. That's the Polygon approach. Because you see, Polygon, for example, when they put someone on stage, what they do is that person stands up and they seriously pretend that Polygon is anything other than something that a complete idiot would build, and they do that by using very long words and lots of them in quick succession, which which then makes it sound much more complex than it really is. But what it really is just a layer two. They're just batching transactions. They take all the transactions in, trust me, we're good, pinky promise, and then they publish it to Ethereum as a data set.
I like
That's
it
it.
when people try to, I like when military briefings go like, we could say preventive, but we're going to say preventative because it sounds like, yeah. Anyway,
What was
yeah,
that thing
just,
about? We were talking about a low light entry.
oh yeah, yeah. No, the rule, briefing rule, never say nighttime parachute jump when you can say sub daylight gravity assisted vertical insertion. That's the rule of thumb.
Okay,
It gives you way
so
more latitude, and it's stupid, and it briefs great to idiots. Doesn't brief so
yeah.
well to your men. They're like, dude, so what does that mean? I'm falling, I get that, but at night, maybe? At maybe night. Anyway, so my the basic cardinal rule here is that to get back to sanity, you reduce complexity. Now that might mean that you got to chop off your favorite feature or whatever, but it's kind of like writing a good story. Kill your darlings always results in a better thing in the end. They just went way the other direction, and I think that's why we thought it was a practical joke. Actually, we really thought that this was like an Easter egg that
the,
we'd found. Like, oh,
there
what
were
a
a
good,
couple of things
haha.
that there were a couple of things you put into the team chat about it that were, you initially laughed thinking that it was something that you had taken from a parody website, and then you
Yes,
checked the URL. It's like, no, this is not a parody website. This is what they actually say.
yeah,
Holy shit.
yeah. It was like a, and there's been quite a few. There's been a few of those just in the basic cryptography too, like the way that weird things have snuck into certain standards, like key generation, that narrow the space dramatically. Anyway, not going to get into all that here, but um, suffice to say, there's a few problems with the way that like core wallet code that people have copied over and over and over and reused without examining very carefully. works. And so we decided, if we're going to give people, if this was a video game, I wouldn't care. But um, other people are going to be doing business that I'm never going to see using this. And it's going to be like some little old lady selling vegetables somewhere in like Argentina, and she's going to just get completely blindsided by some wacko attack that it's not, it's just flat out wrong to try to promise people that they've got a secure thing if the threshold for cracking it is so low. It's just crazy. So um oh, okay, so there's a second half to the story. Forgot. So I was, everything I just described is the browser plugin context, which we know is insane because it's inside of a browser and browsers are nuts. Along with the npm thing and all the dependency injection problem, like security
And
problem.
worse, many of the desktop apps that we utilize now, in fact, including the mobile phone apps, are not properly designed as applications anymore. They are now
Yes.
derivations of browsers. So they come with all of the insecurities that those things have, free and ready to rock and roll the day you install
Yeah.
them.
So the way that there's a, just as one example of that, there's a system called Electron, and what it basically is a stripped down Chrome browser that's bundled together with your web code, and you feel like you're running. I think Discord works that way. The native, so when they say native client, all they've done is they've taken their web face, stripped it off, put it in just a discrete browser that's a little bit lighter weight. But anybody who's ever run Slack realizes it's not lightweight at all. It's all still there, the whole browser and the hundreds of megs of crazy trash. Each tab
But
costs at
but
least a
the
gigabyte.
point is, our idea that these are apps that are in some way secure that operate on our computers is a misnomer because
Oh yeah, yeah.
actually they're not.
And consider what I just said too. Each tab costs you a gigabyte.
Mhm.
We're getting close to the human genome. Nobody has sorted this stuff out. Nobody's really audited these things. And you're supposed to trust your life savings potentially to this, or a
Yep.
week's worth of business at your franchise operation to this.
But this
Like
goes back to why we've been saying that the whole thing that we've seen in Web3 and as it's called and blockchain has not been serious to date. It has not been
utterly
designed for
unserious.
enterprise use because of
Correct.
these kind of things. I mean, you've got the most popular wallet in the entire Web3 blockchain crypto ecosphere uh, is so deeply compromised that you may as well just stick your coins on, I don't know, stick your keys on the window and let people scan them as they drive past.
Yeah, it's that putting your money in there is just like, just stick your fingers in the light socket for a while, get the same effect. Um,
Yeah,
which, however, if you look at the crypto landscape, the way things have played out is that attacking wallets, nobody important has anything on a wallet. Everybody that's got huge amounts of coin somewhere pretty much has that stuff in an exchange where it's not in circulation, it's not being used on chain,
yeah.
it's not being used as currency.
Where it's
So
also
this
not
is,
yours.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
see,
So
these
so that
exchanges, these so-called exchanges, aren't exchanges
mhm,
because they don't actually have properly segregated assets. If
mhm,
Coinbase, for example, who I hear at the moment are slow rolling redemptions, were to have any
mm,
kind of liquidity problem, that problem is not theirs, it's yours because they don't have asset segregation because they're not a properly regulated or structured exchange. They've used the word without understanding what it should mean. And so have all the
right.
others. There are very few I would point at and say to you, yeah, put your money there because they actually know what they're doing and they're being halfway sensible.
Well, that's how
And
we
that's
got the
what proper
FTX
exchanges
debacle.
should be. Yeah, but the FTX is just, I don't think anybody actually learned from it. Or maybe they did. And they decided that the learnings from FTX were not very convenient because they got in the way of continuing the charade that has been the crypto industry for the last 10 years.
Yep,
Anyway,
very much so.
forgive me. I go back to your
So
thread. Forgive me.
okay, so browser plugins are little browser apps that open in a new sort of ephemeral window, but they're fully browser things. You clip that out and make an app of it on the desktop. but all it is you've wrapped up a little browser behind it, and it's still this insane environment. It's not as insane. You don't have commercials running in another tab or something, but it's still pretty crazy. And the npm problem is very, very present. Now, the step further that I didn't expect was that this technique is also used to produce what so-called cross-platform mobile apps. So you can use the same technique to wrap up a browser in a frameless browser and deploy it as a mobile application that'll run on Android and iOS and whatever else. And you do it all at once.
Most
And
of
it's
them
really
are that.
great. Yeah, it's super fast and easy. And it, yay, awesome. I'm an awesome coder. I got 3 platforms covered in a day. The problem is that you still have the NPM issue. The other problem is that you're on a phone now, and phone compromises are kind of a special world of black magic. The biggest handicap that you run into is these wallets, being platform agnostic, do not know anything specific about the platform. The problem with that is that phone compromises are, as I said, a special world of black magic. A lot of intelligence effort has been placed on cracking phones. And phone cracks can catch you by surprise. There's a lot of weird ways to get into a phone. And they're all different though. And they can be different based on the hardware available to the phone. So within most phones, not every phone, but within most phones, they have at least every phone standard has a definition for this. A secure space where keys are never exposed to the outside world. They are governed by a hardware device. There's specific ways to access that. You can ask that device to do signatures or generate keys for you, whatever, but you can never actually get the private key out of it. That's a really important thing to understand about that. The reason that's important is that if you're going to use a novel cryptography scheme, which most crypto does, you might have keys that are not actually compatible with that hardware device, but you need to be aware of the hardware device because it's got keys that can protect your keys now. And if you're oblivious to the presence of the hardware security devices, you can't make wise decisions about how to create a secure execution environment for your own code. And the web apps are just coming in as like alien entities that have no real, they can be like grab camera asset. That's about what they can do. There's very limited crosstalk between applications, hopefully, unless you do something sneaky. But there's very little platform awareness available to a web coder that's right. Remember, writing a web app first and foremost, and then just wrapping that up and deploying it across different platforms. You're not getting into the iPhone security hardware. You're not getting into the Android definition security hardware. The AU has its own specific definition for certain things. SoftBank has its own specific definition for certain things. You're not seeing any of these. They're just invisible. So what that means is and this is true in the browser plugin context. Remember, you've got a mnemonic phrase that's a string of characters, right? Now you think it's a string of words, but here's the fun part about that mnemonic phrase. It's literally just a string of characters. They don't semantically mean anything that you think that they mean. They get plugged into this like a hashing function. It's a scrambling function. As all low order ASCII bits from a handful of words, because that sounds totally sufficient. And out, it's a one-way function. So out on the other side comes your key from this, what's called the seed, the mnemonic seed phrase. The problem here, well, there's a bunch of problems with having this be the one and only way to generate keys. But leaving that aside, leaving the pathing and coverage arguments aside, if you have your private key, and you lost the seed phrase, you can't get the seed phrase back from the key. It's a one-way thing. That means that seed phrase has to be stored in plain text somewhere forever. Now, hopefully it's encrypted somehow, but remember, you just open your browser and the extensions in there, and somehow it's able to sign stuff for you, but you didn't type a password in. So it's not how is it protected? I don't know, but it's always got a hold of these things, and I can say, show my phrase. It's just right there. That is also in my phone somewhere. And there's no difference between the storage mechanisms that have been defined because it's the same app, just wrapped up differently over here. That means that my seed phrase is sitting on that phone somewhere. Now, maybe it's got some kind of key that's encrypted. Maybe it's not actually in plain text, but the startup cycle for that app has a way of unlocking it, and that can always be reversed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get into the code of a phone, I hope I'm not giving bad guys ideas right now, but if you can compromise a phone and that phone's got one of these, web app wrapped up in a wrapped up web app type wallet in it, you can get the seed phrases out of that thing,
Well, hold
guaranteed.
on, Craig. It goes further. I mean, we've discussed this about Zoom, and I often rant about Google Meets because as you sign in, it says, "Let me access everything on your computer." And I said,
Yep.
"Why are you even asking me that question? Name one time in all the years that I've ever touched a computer that I've said yes to this. Get fucked."
Oh,
Um,
that ties directly into this other thing that we want to do that's completely a grids related thing, which is Google wants you to sign into everything in the universe with your Google account so that you don't need
yep,
new accounts. But
yep.
what you've done is you've given yourself one mega account that only they control, and they have this big contract with those one guys. So that's not a good solution at all. Microsoft's doing the same thing. Apple's doing the
Yeah,
same
they're,
thing.
they're, they're
Amazon's
all
doing the same
playing the
thing.
same game. They're all trying to
Yes.
make you completely dependent upon them, and that
Mhm.
uh, really dangerous. But look, coming back to where we're going here with this, so that the summation of it is just about most apps on your phone and on your desktop, whether that desktop is PC, Linux, or Mac OS, they all are using these web apps. Not all, many of them are using these web apps. And essentially, we have a whole series of very insecure environments with all kinds of login conflation and access point openings that are insecure.
Mhm.
Good summation so far?
Yeah, basically. So looking at that situation and then saying, how am I going to build businesses on top of a blockchain system that's got keys that are this open to compromise? Um, and I don't feel comfortable with that at all. It's just that's bad business from like beginning to the end. There's no way that I can ask people to come shop at my store. By the way, use this wallet to do it, and then you know you just opened yourself up to get jack. That's terrible. So the the principle that we took, and this is Peter Harpering and I, when we were kind of starting with some of these ideas, was let's just write a wallet from like with no dependencies. Let's just write all the code. And everybody recoiled. Oh my God, write your own code. That's impossible. It's not. It's just annoying. So we did, and we've written a couple of wallets now with no dependencies. And one great thing is that they're really small and fast. That's always a bonus. Um, we have a desktop wallet now for the Gajumaru called Clutch, and it is all original code. That's also where we're putting developer features because I like to cheat and I have to write stuff for the blockchain. So some things good for me are in there, but it's based on all the same. Like there's some library code in there, and that's all library code that we wrote for the Gajumaru itself. So we were able to like
Yep.
tap dependencies that are from the core Gajumaru code, use it in the wallet. We know every line in there.
Yep.
We even rewrote some. So there were C language signature and cryptography schemes that we rewrote into pure Erlang to make sure we understood them. Peter Harbin did a fantastic job of that. Our Hansi guy with the the most magnificent sarcastic smile in the world. He made Peter's very easy to understand code faster, and that was all. Like anyway, the whole thing was cool. Really glad that we did that. Um, I think we have the most easy to understand SHA-3 code in the world actually now is in our wallet, um, which is Ketchak too. So Ketchak and SHA-3 are actually they're the same algorithm. For some reason, the government, without any explanation, said you need to add 2 bits of padding over here. Yeah, we don't know why. They just do that, and that's SHA-3. And then if you don't do that, it's Ketchak as originally defined. I don't know. The 100-pound head said to do that, so they did. And don't you ever dare question them. So our code does both. We just say do Ketchak or do SHA-3, and it does it all.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was cool. So on the desktop, because we're writing in Erlang, we know what the Erlang environment is. We know what's going on in our code. We know how this manifests in the runtime. We can inspect the runtime as we go. We can keep keys encrypted until the moment that we need to sign something, and then immediately strip them from memory again. Uh, this is that's but like we're going in the right direction.
It's a secure operating environment in which blockchain-based operations can be undertaken properly
Yeah,
by grown-ups in an enterprise context, not
yeah.
by
So
children,
the attack
not by
window
children
on
for
that,
children.
well, the attack window for that is really, really narrow now. Um, it doesn't mean that it can't be attacked. It could be. You could. I mean, that part of that's on the user too. You just have a weak password because it's going to password protect your keys. Our mnemonic phrases are actual encodings of the secret key, so you can go both directions from the mnemonic to the secret key, the secret key back to the mnemonic. So we're not storing this magical passphrase or the mnemonic phrases anywhere. We just have the key and we encrypt that with your password though. So don't have stupid passwords. Uh, anyway, this follows standard practices in computing. We do this with SSH, secure shell, like Open VPN. Everybody does basically what we're doing here. The next step, though, that we really want to get to is the mobile wallet, Arbora, is all written. The current one that we're doing is for Android. We will port that to iPhone later. But we're writing that once again with no dependencies. Android already provides us enough, the graphical libraries and like the widgets to do clicky things and drag stuff. Android already provides all that. We don't need a framework to do this. We just need to spend time being very familiar with Android. The first place we had to put a big time investment up front, though, was learning about the Android security features and how they vary between versions of Android and how they've changed across versions of hardware over time. That has been quite a lot to learn. However, we've gotten to a point now where we have a good paradigm for using the hardware security features to protect our software keys. And then the second step, and this is where GRIDS comes in, is what GRIDS lets you do is a lot of good things, actually. But the basic premise is that everything that you do with blockchain deals with verification by signature, uh, mostly verification by signature. There's a couple of encryption things too, but the big one is verification, either for authentication or for, well, I mean, we use a verification thing based on random message signing that we've adapted for logins, like universal login. So this thing that I just described, where like Google has your Google account and every site you go to wants you to sign in with your Google account, and they make it actually hard on purpose to like sign in with anything else. We can get that single sign-on effect, but only through the wallet without the site operator having to have any private data on you at all. That's awesome. That came out so well that like as we started using it, we're like, man, this is so good. Why hasn't this been the standard for signing into software like since the beginning? I don't know. It's it's I knew it was going to be a good idea, but I didn't know how good that was going to be. Um, that has this that changes the game for login in general. So we call this first party single sign on. So it's SSO single sign on. You can sign anywhere, but it's first party. You're not relying on somebody else. You're not relying on Amazon or Microsoft or Google to sign you in. You're doing it yourself. It's all, and you don't expose any private data when you do this, which is a huge relief for the site operator because they don't have any GDPR burdens now. There's no private data holding burdens unless they, you know, impose them elsewhere on their site. But
Well, I mean,
login's not one of them.
we talk about this.
I did like a short video. Yeah, I like how you hit your head though.
Yeah, sorry, the headphones decided they'd do their own thing, so I decided to teach them that this is not a good idea. And they work again now, which is great. Anyway, um, what you were saying before I had my small coughing fit we do talk about as being the starting point for an Internet of Economics, that rather than having your personal data, um, your account details, your Visa card details, all of these things that in the current context we exchange pretty freely, and hence we have GDPR in Europe. Um, or maybe not actually, but I'm being kind when I say that. Uh, what what we should move to is a state where we have the conventional Internet of Data as a place where we browse to make our decisions. We look for information, we engage with information, and then from there we do the actual transactions from these wallets, which provide the secure interface to do this that removes the need to actually exchange data. So
Mhm. Also, this
you,
also does there's a big separation that can occur also where quite often I want to make a private decision, but I'm making a private decision based on public data, basically. There's no reason to be logged in to a lot of systems that require to be logged in to look at stuff, but they're trying to figure out how to balance private versus public. And the bottom line is what they really need to know is they just need to know that that's definitely you when you make a decision. All the other stuff is just basically for show. You know, they're they're, they're being overly paranoid. Basically, you could make most data public with no issue, as long as you know for absolute certain that there's no way that it's not the real guy, who he claims he is, who's signing something or making a decision. That's kind of the big disconnect, and grids definitely solves that. the sign on the sign on issue that we mentioned a few times before, where you trust Google with all your credentials and everything that you use ever, every device you sign into, every website you go to, either Google or Apple or Amazon or Microsoft or whatever. They own your whole existence, all of it, beginning to end, all your cloud services, your bank log and everything. They own everything. And you're trusting them to log you in. So they authenticate on your behalf.
Mhm,
And sites actively make it difficult for you to just use old school like username, password, or email and password. The reason that they make that hard is they don't want to hold that data. They don't want the private data issue.
mhm,
Um, what we can do with grids though is that not even you don't even have to have like any God user be involved in blockchain at all. You can use our wallet as just a universal sign-on utility, and it's first person. It's you logging into wherever accepts these
I think
logins.
that's something that we would have to make available as a hardware tool, um, at a later point. But for now, we've touched on it. We've talked all around it. What is grids?
Okay, grids. Um, so grids is a protocol. Well, it started as a protocol. It's kind of expanded a little bit. It's basically a dead drop signature protocol uh, that allows you to have data that needs to be signed, have that held somewhere, and then have a separate device, your wallet, or like your phone or whatever. So you're browsing on the internet with your computer, and now you want to log into something or sign. You want to log in, requires a signature, or you want to transact with a blockchain, requires a signature. Same type thing. Um, the thing that needs to be signed is encoded with a location, and that location can be shown to your phone visually through a QR code. The phone can read that, go out separately, separate device. So the phone doesn't know what's going on necessarily. It just knows I need to go get this thing to get signed. Your keys are on your phone. Your computer is what you're browsing with, or you got two phones or whatever. The whole point is that we're separating the execution context that you're cruising around the internet with from the signature context. We're going to physically separate them by device. Um, that also allows us to do a bunch of cool things like it doesn't matter what kind of browser you're using anymore. You could be using a mobile browser or desktop browser. You could be using a text browser. It doesn't matter. We can show this information to your wallet any number of ways. It just has to be able to get hold of an address to pull data from, sign it, and then puts the data back in the same spot. That's basically how the thing's defined. Uh, and then the back end of whatever that system is can go on with whatever it's supposed to do. That's how we made marketplace signatures work snappy. That's how we've escaped from this whole browser nightmare, the security nightmare of the browser context. We don't even have a browser plugin wallet anymore. The whole idea is silly. So we just got rid of the idea. And being able to write, and this kind of goes back to the wallet structure. Having a native wallet that's actually a real native wallet for the desktop is good, and having a native written wallet for mobile is even better, because again, we get physical device separation, that's like 9/10 of security. Access equals compromise. That's a very important thing to remember. And you don't have you don't know which phone the guy browsing your website has. There's millions of phones in the world. You have no idea which one is the one to target if you want to get over on somebody. One step further from that is where we would like to go, which is having full service wallets on mobile devices, but taking all of the keys completely even out of the phone. One more step. And the way that would work is that's basically the same way. The data to be signed that the phone has retrieved, fully encode that visually and show that to some signature hardware. And the only peripheral hardware that this signature device has is a camera to visually interpret data and a screen to visually show data back. And it's not really showing it to you so much. It can show it back to the phone. But the keys never leave that device, and there's actually no physical way to get the keys out, which gets into a key recovery issue where I dropped my hardware wallet in the ocean. How can I get my keys back? That's a very important question if you want to do real business, serious business. So if I run a McDonald's franchise, just 2 stores, the amount of cash that's going to flow through 2 McDonald's stores in a week or a month, because you got your expenses coming up and payroll and all that, is crazy. That's a huge target for compromise. 100% it's worth it to try to compromise this dude's computer or compromise his phone or whatever to get at that money. So you don't want the keys anywhere near either one of those. You want the signature to occur somewhere distant. And if the only way that distant device can communicate is through a camera and a screen, you've massively limited your attack surface. Now, there's other ways to do this through SIM chip things. There's other projects we can get into that get a little bit deeper into physical PKI structure.
Yeah.
But
look,
this is
I think the thing we should come back to is understanding this. What is a secure enclave? Because I think Intel started doing this on their chips in order to create these secure enclaves that they authenticate your login. So when I log into my Mac device, it is using the secure enclave to confirm that is indeed my fingerprint, and it can therefore turn on, right? But there are issues around that, as you point out, that different manufacturers implement things slightly differently. Where the components that go into that are manufactured is also an access and attack vector.
Correct.
So ultimately, it is a very much more secure way of acting than it would be to not operate in the secure enclave. So it's a far, far more secure environment than anything else. But you shouldn't think that it is perfect. And it does have access points and vectors for attack. So the way you very correctly put it is that we should understand your mobile phone and desktop secure enclave as being a probably secure enclave, not a definitely secure enclave. What you're talking about is a hardware step that QPQ IAS would undertake to actually develop an air-gapped device that can communicate with that, where your keys are actually held not on the connected device. And the only means for communication to occur from the air-gapped device, let's say this is it with my mobile phone here, is via this seeing a QR code on the phone and the phone seeing a QR code on this. That's how it communicates the data back and forth and says yes. And in that way, the keys never go onto the connected environment.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
in that
You
way,
you
we
don't want
take the,
Bluetooth. You don't
yeah.
want any of this
So,
stuff. You want total independence.
okay. So if we say that the starting point is to move people from the definitely insecure browser environment where everything is happening at the moment and where all of the wallets are operating, because they are all wrapped browsers and they have the most ridiculous dependencies built into them, some of which read like comedy for geeks, but it's not, it's real. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of comedy for geeks, I had such you and I did a video a little while ago, and there were some things in there that were so funny. Like when you talked about integrating AI and blockchain so that we could, and I said, yeah, if you did that, then what you could do is you could tell all the
Oh,
venture capitalists that you can print money and use AI to do it. And then you said we should
yeah.
call it blockchain.
Yeah,
I
with
thought,
AI capitalized.
yeah, yeah, I thought that was absolutely side-splitting. I showed that to my family, and they said, "Dad, you're such a nerd." But anyway, so
What's
geek
disturbing
humor.
though is I've seen some trade press recently that they talk like that and they're not joking. They think it's like good hype, and I'm like, "Oh no."
I know it's
What
just
it's like Babylon Bee headlines that are like racing reality. It's like my stupid marketing ideas that are jokes or like coming to life, like stop.
yeah, I know, but it's just there's some things that we've had conversations where I've been rolling around laughing, and I've tried to relay the comedy to somebody else, and they've just said, "No, you're such a geek. It just that's just not funny." But the point is, when you read the stuff that you guys were posting in the team chat about what actually is there in these environments, what is in the wallets that everybody is using, you
Hmm.
initially you look at it and go, "That's got to be a comedy." I mean, nobody does that. Nobody is that. Oh my God, right?
Oh yeah,
So
totally serious.
yeah, and um, so this is where we're trying to take people from this completely insecure environment to a probably secure environment using secure enclaves on existing devices. And that's
Yeah,
where we sit grids for now. The plan, which we'll get to in a second, is to expand that enormously by creating properly built hardware that will do the job as we intend. And we have the
correct.
expertise within our family, if you like, to do that and do it extraordinarily well. Um,
Got some crazy talent in that direction, actually. Um,
yeah.
the so the so bottom line is when you're looking at attack vectors, you have to look at the cost of executing a crack. And the cost of cracking the desktop wallet is already high enough that I will use it myself for retail. That's not like my shopping wallet or like online shopping. 100% I'll use it myself for that. But I do know that that's not where I'm like going to keep a nest egg, right? Um, I will I'll make an account. Now I might do it through desktop wallet, but I will remove it from there and keep it as like offline storage only occasionally to see the light of day to send myself money or something. But um, mobile phone, we're getting better, even better than that. I would I would feel comfortable managing a shop or two from the phone wallet. But when you're talking big business or life savings or like important, this is the kids' college money, those type of things where you have a lot of money or even just maybe it's not that much money, but it's a lot of import to you. 100% it's worth it to spend some money. Even, I mean, these
Well,
devices don't have to be super expensive, but it's worth
hold,
it to
hold on.
buy that.
Hold on,
Mhm.
hold on a second, because let's be clear. You and I, a bit like we have geek humor, we have geek ideas of security. So
Mhm.
what you and I consider to be secure or insecure, most people would not even question. So
That's true. That's true.
let's do a clear
No, people
comparison.
trust a little lock icon on their banking website. It's
There you
crazy, but
go.
they do.
That's exactly my point. Okay, so you have banking environments with a little lock icon on it that is in a browser that is completely compromised, and they
Hmm.
think that they are secure. So what we're
Hmm.
talking about, and come back to why do we believe that everybody will use the Gajumaru? Everybody. Because of these kind of things, because it is the bedrock from which an internet of economics, where we actually engage and act upon things that we value, will occur. And that doesn't just
Mhm.
have to be money. That could be assets. That could be data,
Mhm.
private data, important data. What's your date of birth and where were you born? The things that become security questions whenever you fill anything out with the government. You know,
Mhm.
what's your mother's maiden name? Where were you born? What date were you born on? These are information points that should not be in the public domain and most certainly shouldn't be trusted to big tech companies. But so what we're
Oh yeah.
saying, I think we should be very clear about is this is why we are saying that the Gajumaru, which is an open free resource for the world, will be the basis upon which an Internet of Economics will be spawned. The Gajumaru wallet structures, Clutch for the desktop, Arbora for the mobile phone, are a quantum leap forward in security relative to
Mhm.
where we have been. But the point you and I would make is, and by the way, that isn't far enough because
Yeah, yeah.
all we're doing is moving out of a definitely insecure environment to a probably secure environment
Correct.
because you have so many assumptions about what is in the mobile phone that you're using as your secure enclave environment, who built it, what components are in there. All of those things are assumptions of trust. And these are not regulated activities. There's no oversight. There's nobody saying, yes, I confirmed that all of the machines that were installed in this uh, factory were the correct machines that are properly specified and don't have any compromises themselves.
What
Um,
you mean? I can't trust the PLA operated factory that has a subsidiary
Absolutely.
in glorious
Well, look,
Vietnam that
um,
no
there's
bribery
actually
issues there?
there's a book that I would direct anybody who wants to dive into this a bit further about. It was called The Ghost Fleet and was written by a couple of guys who work for Jane Defense Weekly, which is kind of the periodical for the defense industry. It's sort of the reference magazine, reference industry Bible. And they posed a really simple idea, which was that the Chinese would install on an inconsequential uh, motherboard a tiny bump that was off spec. And that tiny bump contained a fragment of code. And once they activated it, it basically then ran through the entire system and shut down all of the uh, networked hardware. So the F-35, the F-22, most of the ships, anything Aegis, all of these things just went pow, offline. And they had to go to using the mothballed aircraft, the mothballed ships in order to fight the war. Whether you think we're going to go to war with China or not is neither here nor there. The point was, it was this tiny compromise on a what everybody thought was an inconsequential motherboard that created this problem.
Mhm.
And that was the access point to potentially win the war. Of course, the book was written by Americans, so America prevailed. But
Of course.
yeah, but in the face of unbelievable odds, of course they did. Anyway, the coming back to the point in hand, we talk about the restoration of data to the individual, the restoration of their money to the individual. That's what the Gaji was all about, creating real money that people can really use. We talk about the restoration of assets to the individual because most assets that we think we have today, we have because the government says we have them. Actually, we
Mhm.
need to move beyond that state. So, for example, if you own a house in Ireland, you own a house because the government says you own a house and it's on the register. Whereas what should really happen is the entire registry should become a data-rich digital asset, which we'll get to in phase two, and enable that thing to exist on chain as a thing.
Mhm.
And in that way, restore the restoration of economic sovereignty to the individual is money, it's assets, and it's data. It's sensitive data. Okay.
Mhm.
So for us, if we're really going to propose a world in which this is the reality, the probabilistic security is simply not good enough. That is probably secure, but you've got a whole bunch of assumptions to make. So what we want to do is get toward building hardware wallets or hardware GRIDS devices, like this sort of thing in size and shape, that you can actually sign transactions with. You can sign to say, yes, I want to send that message from this secure enclave on that connected device, And this is, you're essentially providing approvals and truths all the time without ever giving your keys across.
Hmm. And
Um,
key point: your toddler cannot install sneaky, weird, like freemium games on this. It doesn't have that. Like that's not an avenue of attack at all. Just
yeah,
don't try to
I,
secure sketchy
I
avenues.
maintain,
Don't
I
have sketchy
maintain
avenues.
my wife's phone, I believe, was hacked by one of my children installing an app that they clicked on an ad for when doing something else. I think they were on some website or something, and
Super normal.
it was Freddie. He was about 4, and he just
Hmm.
clicked on something. He got a hold of his mum's phone, clicked on something. I'm pretty sure he installed something, so I ended up having to wipe her phone and start again.
Hmm. Yeah, happens all the time. Is the thing like, and we can't. If you want a general purpose computing device, and you do because it's super convenient, very powerful, you cannot you can't try to enumerate. So this is a very important idea. You can't try to enumerate badness. The amount of badness in the world will always stagger you because what you're really trying to do is enumerate chaos. There's always going to be more
Mhm.
chaos than order. This actually, I'm making an interest argument, but this isn't supposed to be like that. But this is just the shape of the universe. You're not going to ever successfully enumerate badness. What you can do, though, is decide I only need or want to do 3 things. Those are the only 3 things that this thing will be capable of. It's essentially the whitelist approach. I don't
Mhm.
know how much bad there is in the world, just like I don't know how much dark there is in the universe, but I can quantify how much light there is in the universe. Okay, now we're going somewhere. So it's the similar asymmetry between your known knowns, which is this little tiny area, and then your known unknowns, which is actually only slightly larger than that. And then your unknown unknowns are like that's the whole
Yeah.
universe. Um, and your so my point is stop trying to enumerate badness for security. You're always going to fail, but you do want to have general computing. You need general computing. It's very useful. What that means though is that you need to take your private keys out of that environment entirely. Don't have them there.
Hmm.
For your super convenience keys, like I'm at the grocery store, this is like only $50, and cool. But you fill that thing up from your real wallet that's like got most of your money in it. You put some spending cash the same way you put a little bit of cash in your wallet, you go out and spend it. You put a little bit of cash in your phone wallet, go out and spend it. But you don't like put your bank, you don't put your whole payroll into your
Yeah.
personal wallet and walk around with it flopping in your pocket. That's crazy, right? That's an invitation to the wrong kind of person. Don't
Hmm.
invite, don't put invitations out like that into the world because somebody will, show up to the party
Yeah.
inevitably.
So, um,
I'd like to point out, though, that the fact that these problems have not been properly thought through, they've been sort of scammily thought through. There's been like hardware wallet ideas that have come and gone or whatever, but nobody used blockchain for real for normal business yet. And that's why none of this stuff is really solved. Same thing with like, we talked before about the generalized account recovery things, and those type services don't exist yet
we'll come
because no
back
one's
to
being
that.
serious.
No, we'll come back to that because look, the thing is, you guys on the tech team are largely insulated from the conversations I end up having with people, which are mind bending, because you say, like for example, I said to somebody that quid pro quo is the world's first completely on-chain marketplace for goods and services in the real world and in the virtual world. And
Mhm.
everybody thinks I'm wrong. And it's like, okay, well, can you name me a marketplace that has no intermediation, is entirely on chain? All of the transactions are on chain. You don't go out of a web browser, you don't go into another web browser, you don't do any of these things. No, you can't. But they still don't like the idea. And it's weird.
Mhm.
But fundamentally, it all comes down to that point that you just said. Nothing serious is happening in this space. It's happening
Mhm.
upon this space. So, for example, there's a guy I talked to who's very heavily involved in securitization of Bitcoin. And there's a massive amount of business happening around that. But that isn't in, that's on, because the Bitcoin that they have are not they're not operating on chain at all. They are operating off chain. The number of times I have people tell me that Bitcoin works. Christopher Messina told me that Bitcoin works the other day as a payment system. And I said, how do you mean? He said, well, when I went to a hotel in Zug, they offered to take my payment for the hotel in crypto. And I said, yes, but that's intermediated. Doesn't matter. So is Visa. Yes, but the thing is, a currency shouldn't be intermediated. I should be
Hmm.
able to transact with you without anybody else's involvement to expedite that transaction. It might be the case that we're operating on a national payment rail, which is exactly what associate chains are designed to provide for, and that we're
Hmm.
operating at a very much higher frequency, like, for example, the state channel. But ultimately, it it is on chain. It is always
Yes.
on chain. A state channel is always on chain. It is not batching. These are
Hmm.
things that people, I wish, would really understand how important they are, because when your money is intermediated, when your money has an intervention, it isn't money and it isn't yours.
Yes. Also, I think people just don't understand like how jacked up the banking system backroom is. Like it's a nightmare hellscape of reconciliations nonstop because things fall off the edge
Sorry,
constantly. And
did you say that there is a banking system? The only thing systemic in the banking system is risk.
oh yeah,
Nothing else is systemic in the banking system. It is all like a bunch of people sticking their fingers in the dams. You know the story of the boy in Holland?
oh
That's
yeah.
what the
Hmm.
banking system is. The only reason that we continue to maintain the pretense that the banking system has a system other than systemic risk is because the people in the back and the middle office do a phenomenal job of keeping that shit bound.
Imagine if all of that talent or most of that talent could be recruited productively somewhere like that. This is where I wind up getting into this, my sense of kind of what technology should be enabling. We're supposed to have like flying cars and stuff already, instead we got like TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, the
We're
Jetsons was set right now, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and like okay, robot maid make me a pie? Come on. No. Okay, TikTok videos, neat. We've got face filters though for people on, doing that stuff. Um yeah, it's like, the
It's
the US
scarily in
military
tune.
funded ARPANET so that generals could have redundant high-speed access to porn in case of crisis. The fuck no, that's stupid. That's not like come on, people, like, chimpanzees are happy and shit, but like I have
Yeah,
higher aspirations.
this is why we keep using idiocracy as a reference point in our conversations.
Because
It's scarily on
way too
point.
more painfully accurate. Yeah, it's
Uh, uh,
like
you know, it's like Yes Minister. If you want to understand government, watch Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister.
right.
Uh,
It's funny
it's
until you cry. It's
it's funny until it happens to you. Um,
yeah.
so anyway, to come back to the point, we're saying completely insecure world to probably secure world. We'd like to move you to an actually secure world, and this is how you do
Yes.
it. Separate out, physically separate out the thing that is connected from the thing that has your keys and has your signature that you
Hmm.
engage with. You engage with this engages with this. Optically, it's line of sight, it's not interferable. You can't pick
Hmm.
up a radio wave. And this then gets permission via its probably secure environment to act upon the instructions that you've okayed from here, where the actual keys are. Yep.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the things that we also show on the walkthrough video for Quid Pro Quo is the movement of money within the account from the dormant state, the depository state, to the active state. Do you want to explain a
Hmm.
little bit of that in the context of grids? And I should just say that grids we is an abbreviation for Gajumaru Remote Instruction Dispatch and Serialization, which I'll
Yes, it
get you to
is.
explain a bit more in a second. But for now, just explain that movement and why that is how we structured it. That we're not using hot and cold wallets in the way that is traditionally done. I say traditionally, for the last 10 years has been done in the
Hmm.
blockchain space. Why did we move away from that to this solution set, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so like you can use, and people will use cold wallet. What a cold wallet is you generate an account, the public address to it, and then you remove all traces of it from the digital world, period. And you only use it as a place you can put money. You know you can get it out by reinstantiating that wallet at some point in the future. That's a great way to deal with money you're going to keep for a long time. The problem comes in when you start thinking about what's the nature of money. Well, money's kind of like batteries. Now, people want to have a lot of money, but if you just have a lot of money and then you
I
spend a
like
lot of
money.
money, yeah, you go back to not having any money. So the more accurate way to think about money is as batteries. How do you engage this into the economy and have it doing things for you? How do you recruit it into something valuable? Um, rich people, nobody gets rich by stuffing money like cash into their mattress, right? Besides, the inflation rate will just like you need a big mattress. Um, so having money actively engaged. If you look actually at Bitcoin,
Well,
what percentage?
let's be very fundamental. If you
Mhm.
cannot use our currency without
It's not a
intermediation,
currency.
without intervention, it isn't a currency. You need to be able to
Yes.
buy a house with it. You need to be able to buy a coffee with it. And if you cannot, it is not a currency. And saying that
Yes.
something is a store of value without it having the other characteristics of a currency means it's a fail. The other thing that you no doubt come across plenty yourself is what about argument? Well, what about the fact that all the fiat money is not really money either? Yeah, I didn't say it was. Just because
Yeah.
one thing, just because I'm saying being punched in the face is bad doesn't mean I'm okay with being punched in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like, wait, being punched in the nose hurts? So your balls are fine? No, actually, no. Two things can be true at once. And
correct. So it's
yeah.
actually quite hard to get people to move beyond that. And I had a guy today tell me that in South Africa you can pay at the till using Bitcoin. And I said, there's no way you can walk into Pick and Pay in South Africa, which is one of the main supermarket chains, and pay for things. Because if you could, there would be hour-long queues and nobody would be
Yes.
selling any frozen goods or cooled goods at all. The
Hmm.
queues would not just be because there's yet another brownout or blackout. It would be
Hmm.
because actually we're waiting for the Bitcoin to transact. This is not it, Bitcoin was a white paper, a proof of concept of millennial significance. This is the doorway. It opened the doorway to a step change from one in which, ever since the first steps into the agrarian world, where we began to settle land, from that point to this, we have been dependent upon intermediaries to do our transactions, to do our trades. Even when you go back to the US dollar being gold backed, you still had to trust that the US Federal Reserve had the gold to back the dollar that you had in your hand. There had to be a degree of trust even there. The
Hmm.
transition across to real money in the context of it being an extractable value, a demonstrable extractable value from a proven finite resource actually opens up so many more doorways. The fact that you
Hmm.
no longer need any degree of trust. This is what we mean when we talk about trustless. You don't need to trust that that money is
Hmm.
money. It is money. Um, it has literally been mined from a finite resource, and you can prove that it has been mined. All of these things are true. Uh, I think that the frustration for me on this is that it's really hard to have a proper conversation with somebody when people are being intellectually dishonest all the time and throwing out what about arguments and offering up intermediated services as if they are the same as peer-to-peer engagement, which is what Bitcoin was meant to be about. So the whole idea is
Hmm.
it moves us away from this intermediated trust required world to a world that is not intermediated, where we are free to do what we want to do. We're free to do it with whom we want to do it. And ultimately, money is money. That is such a massive opportunity for freedom. It's why I have been doing this for 23 years. It's not because I can't think of anything else to do with myself. Uh, I'm sure you would say the same. Why have you been in this for as many years as you've been in this? Because this signposted a transitional future that freed humanity, literally freed. Once you own your data, your assets, and your money, you're golden. You
Hmm.
actually are a sovereign person. I pointed this out the other day that the founding fathers of America would have prescribed this if they knew it could have existed. along with the
Yes.
right to guns. Because once you have the right to defend yourself and the right not to be imposed upon by your government, the ability to arm and form a militia, if you then add in, you own your own data, you own your own assets, you own your own money, there's not an awful lot that an oppressive force can do. In fact,
Yeah.
government has got to ask you for permission to do the things it does. And this is the transition that we really need to make to get away from this whole socialist nightmare that we're dropping into. But forgive me on the
Mhm.
rant. The point that we want to get to here is I was asking you to outline why we didn't go with the traditional cold hot wallet approach and instead we're working, and you're right, we could still have a cold wallet that
Yeah.
is completely distinct again. But in the
Mhm.
context of the walkthrough on quid pro quo, it was a
Mhm.
definite point that we moved money from one part of the secure enclave to the active part. Can you explain a little bit more
So
on that, please?
yeah, so your money as accounted for on the chain itself, right? The I don't know, the kind of fun thing about what smart contracts let you do is smart contracts are these kind of um they're like these drone accounts that live on the chain and they can have their own logic. And in quid pro quo, the way that a sale is represented is as a smart contract and it's on chain, which means it's an account that you can pay money to and it can pay out. Um, so you have a whole bunch of new magical properties here that you don't have to have the marketplace interfere. Like you don't have to prepay to the marketplace and trust them. You can prepay into the contract, into the sale, and you've proven, hey, I'm serious about this. Like I'm so serious that I've already paid somebody. Now the contract's holding it in escrow at the moment.
Mhm.
It's waiting for both of us. We both have to agree to this before it moves anywhere. And this gives you a lot of really cool possibilities. And I mean, just for example, I'm saying the buyer and the seller have to agree because this is a simple version of the marketplace right now. Now let's get a shipping deal. And as an option, you include the shipper as the final authorizing authority, right? So if they're the final authority in it, you now have pay on delivery or partial pay on delivery or partial prepay to pay for the shipping, then full payment on delivery. But you have a final authentication because this is blockchain, right? There's not a whole lot of, handrails. If you paid somebody, you really paid them. Uh, so you want to have some intermediation in terms of the logic of what is a sale. You don't want to have trusted intermediation where I give a bunch of money to somebody and if they just decide to disappear overnight, like, Mount Gox everybody, well, then that's just gone. That's terrible. You don't want that. But we can do this completely safely on chain using smart contracts. And it's kind of funny that the name of it's a smart contract, which in a smart contract is really like a program, but we call it a smart contract.
It is a
They're
program.
rarely actually used as contracts. Yeah, they're programs. They're just rarely used as contracts. But in this context, we have a sales contract, and the sales contract holds the money for you because it can do that, and you can't do that in like a normal. You can't do that in a normal world.
Yeah, but
Um,
also critically, we've taken away the need for having a developer write that smart contract for you. The system is writing it for you as you're negotiating it.
you sort of, yeah. So the contract is like, well, I wrote the template, right? But the
Mhm.
template is just this. It's posted to the chain with like all zero values. When you create a new sale, that gets cloned, but it's populated with your levels, what you chose as the seller and the buyer, and that finally updates the contract to a final state where it goes, okay, this is the success criteria. You get paid, the marketplace gets paid a tiny percentage because that's part of the logic of again, if you want to see exactly how much, like, is quid pro quo screwing you, go read the sales contract. It says exactly, like, you can read it's Sophie is thankfully a simple language with no holes in it, so you can read the sales contract and go, hey, that's exactly what happens on this criteria. And it says
Mhm.
like require
Yeah,
that X
because
Y Z, and then this
actually,
happens.
there's a huge issue around Solidity and other languages that aren't as evolved, where essentially you have to create agency risk because somebody has got to say this is the same as what the whole contract says over here. So this
Yeah.
300-page contract that you're going to write for, let's say, a securities market transaction, they are huge. This is why big law firms in London are heaving with people surrounded by mounds of paperwork in these big law firms in London. It's why I didn't stay in law. Uh,
Why, that sounds wonderful. Ooh.
yeah, it's horrendous. But those contracts, to say that that is the same thing that is in code is really hard unless the plain language content is good enough to convey
Mhm.
that similarity, that somebody doesn't have to essentially take legal risk as a translator. But that's a whole other day's discussion. Coming back
Mhm.
to the point now, so we've structured it in such a way that you're moving the money from the secure enclave into the smart contract escrow, which is also secure and
It's secured
operative.
by the chain. Yeah. Like you're
Yeah.
saying, I'm taking this money out of my account and it's going into play now. And that's the activation signal for this contract to tell the marketplace and the seller, hey, you got a hit. Negotiate
Yeah.
this.
But more to the point, to be clear, quid pro quo, which is a proprietary platform, does not access that. It does not
Correct.
control that. It
Correct.
isn't
All the
like
quid pro
saying
quo
I'm going
does
to
is
put money
matches.
into my I'm going to put money into my Amazon account, for example. It's not
Correct.
that. This is
Correct.
actually going from your secure enclave to the blockchain itself, and
Mhm.
then is reflected and seen by the marketplace, which can then provide the smart contract
Right. So yeah, to be really clear,
negotiation.
your account on the chain is a contract call is generated that is from your account to the smart contract. You authenticate that and submit that back to, and you sign it and you send that back to the chain. You submit it to the chain. The chain leader processes that transaction. That updates the state of the chain. So at this moment, you have 10 Gajus. The next moment, 5 of those have been put into a smart contract. And the other person is now the marketplace back in says, hey, somebody did this for you. But at no point whatsoever, does any of that money have to be like you don't have to trust quid pro quo for this. Quid pro quo is a matchmaker only. Like it's not actually
Yeah.
involved in any of the transactions. It tees up the ball for you and says because it's complicated to do contract call data generation. So the backend does that and sets it up and says, this is a contract call. This is what it does. This is a contract that you're calling. Do you want to sign this or not? And you go,
Mhm.
yes. And it goes, cool. I'm sending it to the block. I'm not the blockchain. Quid pro quo is not the blockchain. The blockchain's like this network crazy thing that's everywhere and nowhere because it's a network. Yeah. So the big magic point here is that quid pro quo as a marketplace is purely performing the market function. It is not performing escrow itself. It's never holding any money from anybody at all. It's not involved in authenticating or whatever. All it is a matchmaker. It's like I want to sell something, so I put a picture and a description up of the thing I want to sell. Somebody else comes in and they say, hey, I want to buy that. And so they do that. But all the transactions are purely through the chain, not through quid pro quo itself. Quid pro quo builds the call data up and sets it up for you because that's, complicated to do by yourself, which you could do, but it's, quid pro quo makes it easy to interact with the chain. But it's all the interactions are on chain, the payouts are on chain. Quid pro quo itself gets paid out on chain. Um, but yeah, you don't have to. I mean, these are direct transfers from the buyer to the contract, and then later from the contract to the seller, or back to the buyer if
Mhm.
everything gets canceled. Um, it's a really slick way to do. It's great. The one place where quid pro quo does take an action is that if you try to put like an illegal thing to sell on quid pro quo, they can remove that sale
Yeah.
item from
There
view,
has
right?
to
But
be an intermediation level
yeah,
where
it's a family
we,
friendly site, so the site's not going to show you crazy stuff. But even at that, like quid pro quo cannot control the chain because the chain's a separate thing. We just built a marketplace on top of it. And uh, I wish this could have been done years ago, but none of the chains were ready for it. Unfortunately, it was just like tooth pulling to try to get anything working.
Yeah. So, um, moving on from that, and coming into grids. So we touched on a few times around generalized accounts and
Mhm.
our intention. So our intention there, to be clear, is we don't own the Gajumaru, we don't control the Gajumaru, but we do
Mhm.
have significant first mover advantage to understand what opportunity sets it opens up. And one of those things is to set up a regulated entity, QPQ Capital, here in Switzerland, that would allow us to provide various regulated services such as on ramps, off ramps, and critically, key management services.
Mhm.
And so this is where we come into the generalized account part. And I think it's something that people should understand. And you touched on it earlier when you were talking about what happens with the guy with the McDonald's franchises, the two McDonald's franchises. So just expand on that a little bit more for me, please. Starting with what is the problem that generalized accounts solve, and then how do they solve it, and specifically how have we implemented it such that it can be solved?
Okay, so generalized accounts are this interesting idea where we've had a problem in blockchain where you can't do automated actions based on some criteria because you have to have somebody sign at some point to authenticate whatever action you're doing. What a generalized account is it's an account that's paired with a contract, and that contract is what carries its authentication logic. And so what that means is you can have an account that's allowed to disperse funds or do whatever kind of do make a contract call, behave just like a person based on whatever a call to some contract logic returns, true or false. The number of things you can come up with based on that, I don't know that there's a limit to. But one of the really interesting things that you can do, it's very simple and easy to understand, is you can have your big business account. And okay, the McDonald's franchise guy. So a guy owns two McDonald's franchises. They make tons of money. He's got to hold that money for maybe a quarter. That could be a ton of money that he's sitting on. Um, that shouldn't just go into his phone wallet, right?
Hmm.
That that account needs to be a little bit more secure. So this we're getting into the territory where even a pretty expensive hardware phone is a really valuable purchase for somebody doing serious business. So to secure his, the bulk earnings that he's got to sit on, the amount of float that might go through a couple of McDonald's in a month or two, um, he's going to want a hardware signature device for that. So he goes on a fishing trip, plop, stuff goes into Davy Jones' locker. Davy Jones never letting this out.
Hmm.
That was the key. What do you do? Well, traditionally, like in the Bitcoin world, that's the end of the story. Ta-da!
Hmm.
That shit's just gone. Fantastic. Um, what QPQ Capital can do is there's two routes to resolving this issue. One is key recovery by, secret key escrow. You've got a holder that's got it in a vault somewhere, physically maybe. This is an expensive service. Um, Now, if you've got how much you're willing to spend to secure your money goes up as the amount of money involved goes up, right? So it makes perfect sense to actually have, no kidding, at some level of money. It makes like if you've got the amount of money that an airlines has in their rainy day fund for fuel in case like another world war breaks out, they keep tons of cash on hand somewhere, right? Um, it would make sense to actually pay a Swiss bank to have a red phone and say, send Elsa out with the new key. Okay.
Hmm.
But if you're a McDonald's dude, no, you definitely need to secure this. You need a hardware wallet, but you're not going to spend that kind of money on that type of service. So with the generalized account, this is where generalized account solution comes in. You could have a generalized account, the signature logic for which is, if this guy's account signs a transaction, which the contract paired with that account can verify, if that's the signature that you get, have the generalized account take action on his behalf. So whatever he signed, the GA actually does, right? So you've separated now the authentication from the action a little bit. What QBQ Capital can do is have the ability not to sign those transactions, but to update to a new key. So you can remotely you can have this guy get a new hardware wallet. Nobody even knows what key's on it. He gets it. Hey, this is my key. He authenticates some different way to QBQ Capital. QBQ Capital says, okay, that's now your active key. Voila, keep going. So
Yep.
There's ways to get around this key loss problem by using a trusted party. And this is trust, right? This is a trusted party.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
You're
look,
putting your faith in a Swiss bank.
Craig, this is the point I've been saying, which I'm blue in the face for 8 years in the blockchain space, which is if at any point you create a single point of failure, you create trust. If you create an aggregation, you create trust. If you hand any function off to a third party, you create a need for trust. And the only way that we should be looking at trusted operating environments is they should, in some shape or form, be appropriately regulated for the service they're providing. And this is key because when we give somebody trust who is an unknown third party or company, there is a brand identity around that that gives us some of that trust. For example, we might trust PayPal, even though it's not a bank. But at no point should we be happy with the idea that we are handing control over to a third party whose only promise is a pinky swear that they will honor what you owe. The so-called exchanges, for example, that we touched on earlier, no insurance coverage for your assets if something happens. All because they're not regulated. If this was the New York Stock Exchange, none of these things would be true. So there's no insurance. The insurance cover is at best 2 to 3% of the asset base. One. Two, your assets and everybody else's assets are actually in their wallet, in their custody, but they're not.
And so is your fiat.
They're not regulated. Yeah, and so is your fiat. So it's a wonderful world in which they have both your money and your cryptographic
They
assets.
got your fiat and your crypto. Give me both. I promise this won't go wrong.
Right. And the thing I just don't understand is how anybody can think that that is an okay state. It's disastrous. And so the point that we're making very directly here is technically, I don't think you need to be regulated to offer generalized accounts, not in the crypto space right now. But our position is it should be regulated. It should be overseen. It should be auditable. And if it isn't, why are you trusting it? So we're going to walk the walk. Other people are talking these things, but they're not actually doing them. We're going to walk the walk, and we're going to provide this as a proper service from a Swiss self-regulated organization that sets up with QPQ Capital. And we want to go from there to a fintech license and in time to a full-scale banking license. But it starts by doing things like this well.
The strange thing to me about the lack of reception that we get from the crypto world on things like this is that we're talking about not exactly a sexy business, but it's a very necessary aspect of doing real business in a razor sharp world, blockchain, where shit's real and you need to get this right. And you could be talking about big sums of money that a business. So the example that I gave was McDonald's, right? Those are franchise businesses. They're not major, huge mega businesses. McDonald's itself is, but the franchise is not. These are people that got jobs. You got high school kids trying to make some early college money, things like that, working there. You got the franchise owner. He's got a family. These are people this is going to hit real people if stuff gets lost. You can't just flippantly blow that off and say, yeah, man, well, that's their problem. No, dude, they need to have a way to have
Yeah.
this recovered. That's a service that's worth money. That's a good business opportunity. We should jump on that. But is it like, dude, I'm gonna combine like feline healthcare and AI and blockchain, bro. Putting feline healthcare on the blockchain with AI. Like that's
Uh,
some dumb shit you'd hear at like a
Stop.
conference.
That is exactly the dumb shit I saw last week.
Oh
But move
God.
on.
Yeah, like I thought of it so surely. It's like Rule 34, right? Like if you can imagine it, there's porn of it somewhere. If I can imagine some insane thing, Greg's actually heard like a legit, no kidding, totally straight face
Well,
presentation about it at
it
like a
is
crypto
kidding, but
conference.
to me, it's definitely kidding. But they say it with a straight face, and they
Oh, they're
expect people.
super
And what's worse is other people in the room don't just fall about laughing.
right. Which I anyway, my point is that this is just like sober business 101. How are you going to run franchise size or bigger small and medium businesses? Which is, by the way, people forget they're looking for the mega contract with like, I want the Honda factory tooling contract. Dude, someone's going to get that. That's mega business. It's freaking Honda. But 92% of the economy pre-COVID, hey, look, there's an angle there, um, is small and medium business.
Yep.
That's like the whole freaking thing. So where do you market to? Market to the little guy because everyone's a little guy. And that's actually kind of awesome. So we need to cover sober, ordinary, like not pie in the sky crazy stuff. We have to, I mean, that's why we started with a marketplace. What do people do? They say, dude, I got a thingy, you need a thingy, let's do business. Like, let's match make. Okay, cool, quid pro quo comes about. Whoa, okay, now, hey, I mowed your yard, pay me. Okay, cool, there's a thing called pay me. I'll invoice you, you just pay me on the blockchain. Super cool. Point of sale, hey, I like that, I like those muffins, give me those muffins. And he's like, give me some gajus. Okay, cool. Pay at the register. Like these are the super,
Yeah.
these are
No,
the
look,
obvious things that should have existed 10 years ago.
if Bitcoin or any, well, I don't think that anybody has actually tried to create real money other than Satoshi in a blockchain context, which is,
Mm-hmm.
the provable mining of a finite resource, which is the cryptographic puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's when you look at things like this that you really peel away that veneer of lies and fraud and bullshit, which is that it's money when you can't walk into a shop, scan a QR code, and make a payment. That's exactly what we're making possible. You can walk into, well, I would very much like to be able to get people where I live to do it because the bakery down the road does some awesome cakes. Be able to go in there and say, hey, guten Morgen, I'm Gipfeli bitte, and be able to the same as I scan, I put my phone up against the little thing and Swiss Pay or whatever it is, I forget what they call it. It works really well. There's a communication from my phone to it through NFC. With what we're talking about, we can do that much more securely by doing it via QR code. It scans the QR
Yeah.
code, operates on that visual plane,
Mm-hmm.
not in
And
a
yeah.
not in a near frequency radio. And
And everybody involved gets to offload the security problem to the chain itself because it's all on chain. It's not like a voucher system that's intermediated by some weird back end. And then you're walking around like, do I need to get one of those weird Faraday wallets because I got one of those little like wireless cards or none of that's an issue, which is great. Like
yeah,
this is the right area to go.
so um, when we're we have all of these tools that we're building out for people to use, but in the context of generalized accounts, the key piece there is that it allows somebody to have. Sorry, you were touching on two aspects. The first was the lost key problem. Go
Mm-hmm.
into the second.
Which, oh, I'm lost now. Okay. Second aspect.
Sorry, we got diverted there.
Yes.
At the outset of the conversation around generalized accounts, you said that they solve two problems. The first problem is what happens when you lose your key. So it's
Oh,
key
well, okay.
recovery.
That okay, right. Okay. So the number of problems though that generalized accounts can solve is like use your imagination. This is a really
Sure.
general tool. Um, so there. yeah. So this other thing that I think it was the original motivation for this. I'd have to ask Cons to be sure, but the original motivation, I believe, for this idea was that you needed something that operated like you could script in a back end to work like a person that would have like a good enough authenticator to take an action on a back end system's behalf without giving it like private keys
Mhm.
and making that back end this like new point of compromise. Uh, and you can come up with logical systems where that checks out. You've got some logical check that's embodied in a contract that's tied to the generalized account. Now, the things you might use that for, though, that could be like, again, use your imagination. There's a ton of uses for this. It's a very advanced feature. It's not been, it's kind of like, actually, man, it sits right in the same zone as state channels, where it's this brilliant idea. It's obviously correct. Uh, the number of things people might do with it is just unexplored right now, because
Mhm.
people like these really useful tools came out about the same time, like these new ideas came out about the same time that people started like kind of cat chasing the laser pointer with
Mhm.
like what's the new hot thing at the conference in Zug. And they're like, oh, validator systems, ooh, we got to have that too, and so everyone's chasing like whatever last cool feature was. It's kind of like last war syndrome, and
Mhm.
except it's just way faster and a lot funnier in some respects in the crypto world. Um, but generalized accounts and state channels both live in this weird space where it's like these are obviously correct ideas that are really, really good solutions, and nobody knows yet how far that like how what the kind of legs are on this, as opposed to, interestingly, oracles, which turn out to be a really fraught area. Like the basic idea makes sense, but the way
Mhm.
oracles actually are employed in practice always has a security game around it that can be, you can
Completely gamed.
find some way to one shot or beat, and that sucks. So prop betting, for example, people are like, oh, well, we'll make betting site online betting will be run by oracles. Okay, you've just made oracles this huge target that nobody understands very well and are easy to compromise. That was dumb. So someday all the bets are going to get like rigged by somebody who understands how to compromise that. That's silly. What you want in a prop betting system is you want an actual trusted party that's an officiator.
Yep.
Okay, that's the problem. You still got like, just because you have blockchain doesn't mean you remove people from the system. The
No,
whole
I mean,
point is
look,
people.
this is where I'm quite careful with my language. That I say that blockchain allows us to trust the message, not the messenger, securely at scale, comma, removing non-value additive intermediary layers.
Mhm.
Non-value additive is the key part because, as you just illustrated, they do add value. And until someone finds a way to have a non-gamed solution set around that, but that isn't
Mhm.
blockchain per se. That is something
Mhm.
else that sits outside of the blockchain context.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's another thing too. A ton of stuff, all the important stuff really sits outside of the blockchain context, and the blockchain like references these things. And that's important to know, because people, I remember when I first started looking into blockchain, and it just was weird to me because the bullshit detector just kept going off constantly, because they're like, you can write a whole game on blockchain, it'll run all over the world. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense from the description that I just read. What are
mm,
you talking about? And I look into it, and it's like, oh yeah, no, that's all just some marketing guy wrote that. I don't know who.
no, I
Um,
think you're being generous. Some crook wrote that with the intent of defrauding
maybe
people of their money who think that the magic that they spout actually is real, not just magical thinking or magical
it's
fraud.
it
But
was
look,
just like that was
I'm
the
conscious
beginning of
of time.
disappointment.
I'm conscious of time and how late it's becoming your time.
Mhm.
Let's come to the last 2 points I wanted to raise in this discussion. So we have generalized accounts. We have our plan for offering generalized accounts as a properly regulated entity, which is great. Very happy with that. I think that's one of the key things that we're going to do as a business built upon a blockchain.
Mhm.
When we start looking beyond that and looking at the hardware things that we want to do, we've talked a number of times over the last 18 months, yeah, 18 months, I guess, about how you might create hardware wallets. and hardware wallets, hardware systems. So GRIDS specifically as a device that communicates through a camera and a screen.
Hmm.
That's something we definitely want to build. We've got some fantastic talent within the broader QPQ family that can do that to a level that would just be eye-popping. Um, that's one part of it. How might something like that work with, for example, sending an email, sending a secure message? So instead of us using WhatsApp, how might grids fit into the context of messaging from person to person? Because we kind of do that in the quid pro quo walkthrough, right? We're sending
Hmm.
messages through the blockchain via grids.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the
Okay.
QR
So
code can actually be much more information than just an address. It can be the whole message.
it could, yeah. You do run into a limitation on size at some point. On the other hand, text compresses remarkably well, so you can actually get a lot more bounds out of that than some would expect. Because most messages actually aren't that long. The meaning might be huge, but the message itself is not necessarily huge, unless I write it because I'm too verbose. Um, the so there's two different things that you can enable uh, with a hardware wallet. One is authentication, which we've already discussed, right? But what something that authentication can enable is your assent to engage in a new communication channel, and both parties can verify that that's true. And this sounds like a magic trick, but it's a weird crypto thing. You can agree on a symmetric key together using only public information, and nobody can guess what that key is. There's a way to do that. Um, so my point is, you could agree to open a new channel with somebody, not even going through the blockchain, but use your signature device that everybody can be like, oh, that's the same dude that I've seen on chain, or the same guy that signed other stuff. So they can verify it's you through this indirect method stored on chain forever that you can go look up. That's actually pretty cool. And then they can say, yeah, that's definitely who I'm talking to right now. Therefore, I agree to open a message channel with him. And so we hop from that world onto a known world of how to do secure end-to-end messaging. So this can be an entryway, like your key to the blockchain can also be your key to secure messaging routes. Um, and that can be a lot more than just a message. If you agree to a secure stream cipher, you could like do this call that way. I mean, there's the back end would just need to be aware of what's going on. Oh, they've agreed to this, so this, all right, this is what we're doing now, and then affect
Yeah,
A
because
and B.
secure communications is a huge issue. We touched on it earlier that people accept the lock bar in their browser, and they had to be told about it for a long time first. They accept
Mm-hmm.
that as saying that they're operating in a secure environment. And why? Because someone said so. It's quite a ridiculous state, but secure communications are a massive issue, and it's not just at the kind of the spook level. It's right down to somebody working in a company who has to sign transactions, who has signatory authority for a company.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to send an email to you, and I don't really care who else reads my email, then the existing Internet of Data is perfectly fine. But if I want to send an email to you that contains confidential information that is actually very sensitive, I would like to use this as a system to do it. And that's where we're going to evolve this, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's not just about a transaction where you send someone money and someone receives that money and says, yes, I will now send you the goat soap. It's much more fundamental than that. This will translate into something that becomes about secure communication between peers globally. That when we talk about the Internet of Economics, it's about your money, your assets, and your data. That sensitive data is yours, and how you share it and who you share it with is a fundamental part of what we're trying to solve.
So there's two sides to this in terms of securing communication. One is you want everybody between A and B needs to only be aware that A is trying to get a message to B, but they can't see what the message is, right? So the routing is defined. However, knowing that A talked to B may itself be a confidential issue.
Mhm.
So the traffic pattern of the communication may itself reveal something significant. Now, there are other ways that I've spent some time messing with before to actually get around that. That's not directly kind of a grids issue, but I think there's another business over there somewhere that
Mhm.
we may want to look into at some point. But that's important to understand that there's two pieces of information. One is the content of the message, and the other is the route of the message may itself be as significant as whatever was in the message.
Mhm.
And figuring out a solution that can work for both sides of that are important. This other, I guess, another aspect of this kind of the side channel aspect is um, when you've got when you're buying your the hardware that you're running, what you think is your secure communication, or you think is your secure signature thing, or you think is your business on, uh, and you're buying it from a subsidiary of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, and then you're shocked that that's compromised. Don't be shocked. You bought this from the PLA. Like, of course it's compromised. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sold it to you at a loss, which they do. So of course it's compromised. They sell it at a loss because for them, they view that as a that's a worthy expense from their perspective. Uh, but of course it's
Yeah, I mean,
compromised. Like that
how
shouldn't
much does it
shock
cost?
anybody.
How much did it cost America and the lead partners to design and build the F-35 versus
Oh,
how
geez.
much we handed it to China? I'm not sure what the losses were on the equipment that was used, that all of those things were communicated across, but
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure it was a lot less than the R&D effort to make the F-35.
Oh
And
yeah,
Kel Surprise, the Chinese have got an F-35 copy in the skies.
yeah. So there's a human angle to this, which often involves funny stories. But yeah, but the technical aspects of data collection for intelligence are vast, and there's a massive problem that the West has got where they think, you know, for some reason they've got it in their head that, well, we're the only ones that understand math at this level, therefore it's totally okay to force everybody to put backdoors and all their stuff. Bruce Schneier was correct when he said that everyone spies or nobody spies, but you don't get this, like, you can't pick who's using the back door. There's a door there. Someone's going to figure out. And some of these back doors are like really obvious, stupid kind of. Like, I'm not even a mathematician. Peter is a mathematician, like legit. I'm not. If I'm able to smell some wrongness in some of the crypto standard, like, hey, that's suspicious. Why are we putting all in eggs in one basket? Why do these things point both ways? Isn't that shut up, stop talking? You know, if and I'm not even a mathematician. Um, then like think about how easy of a walkthrough some of this is for like a legit, like, China's got a billion something people. In a billion something people, a backdoor is going to be obvious to somebody, right? Like just the right
Mhm.
set of eyes is going to see the wrong thing. And they got a lot of sets of eyes, and they've been very active at recruiting. And I'm just talking about China right now. I'm not even talking about
Uh,
corporate espionage.
Look, this is a conversation, this leads to a conversation that we've had many times about how human intelligence has been completely devalued and sidelined within the intelligence community for the last 30 years because everything
Yeah.
became about signals intelligence. And signals intelligence, as you say, relied upon this fact that there were backdoors into everything. And if there are backdoors into everything, then everything is compromised, as you point out.
Mhm.
So you can't really complain if your compromise for everybody else got applied to you. It's the reality of the
Yeah.
system. What we're trying to get
Also,
toward is a state where we can actually provide a secure tool set. What we can't do is make people behave in a secure way.
I'll I'll give you the proof that everything is compromised. It's a very logical predicate. The nerds that made up all the back doors are anime obsessed nerds. They're all weeaboos.
Mhm.
What does China have in spades? bikini model level hot Asian chicks. Where do they dispatch them to? The hopeless incel nerds that are obsessed with chicks that look just like that, who work for the NSA. And then one morning they wake up and the girl is gone with your hard drives, teddies and all. Poof. Where did that go? Who knows? But now they're back home, and the university's got more stuff to research for free. Well, not entirely free, but effectively. That is a literal pattern that happens. Like, that is I'm not even being crass. That's exactly the cycle. It's just I, I'm
So
astounded at how dumb this
the
is.
summary highlights of the conversation are that we have built a wallet from scratch. That wallet has no dependencies in it that we didn't code as a library set. That means it
Mhm.
does not come pre-hacked. That means it is a viable basis for which people can actually start to conduct their lives within what we refer to as the Internet of Economics, which is a world in which all of your assets, all of your sensitive data, and all of your money is yours and under your control. Um, in order to make that secure, we use secure enclaves on the devices, but that is our first step, which is to move people from a highly insecure browser type environment to a probably secure enclave on your device, whether that's a mobile phone um, or a computer. That then takes us to another step, which we will implement, funds permitting, as soon as we can, which allows people to have a GRIDS authentication device, which is Gajumaru Remote Instruction Dispatch and Serialization, that
Yes,
would
it
allow
is.
somebody to scan the QR code optically that is on the device, whether that's a mobile phone or a computer screen, and then reflect back to the camera another response code. And in that way, you have that security is on site. That works very well for sending messages in the form of a QR code, whether that is to send a validation or a signature, or it's to send a clump of data that is text. Where we would like this to evolve in time is to creating secure communication channels, point-to-point secure communication channels that have that same authentication, that same air-gapped approach that allows you to have a signature to say, I am going to have a conversation with Craig, and we both authenticate that we are operating through that. That is not grids per se, but grids is the cornerstone of how you get there.